Sumer is the earliest known civilization, which was located in Mesopotamia, now part of Iraq. They lived at a time when lions and tigers roamed their lands, when Persian leopards could have threatened their existence. Yet, they persisted. They were a remarkable civilization that survived for more than 3 millennia and paved the way for humankind forever. There is debate about where these Sumerians came from. Some suggest they migrated from North Africa into the Middle East. Others have suggested an origin in West Asia. Whilst most of the global human population were hunter-gatherers at the time, the Sumerians decided to settle when they found fertile lands. Many of the settlements were built on a stretch of land between the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. That stretch of land became known as Mesopotamia. The region is often referred to as the cradle of civilization, along with other locations like Egypt and the Indus Valley. The Sumer people settled from around 5300 BC to 1940 BC. This civilization lived in a world very different from today. Wild predators wandered nearby. And with the development of their civilization, the Sumerians took on the challenge of taming some of these to help work their lands and to provide meat, milk, wool, and leather. The Sumerians were believed to be the first people to begin farming. They stopped the hunter-gatherer lifestyle and instead grew their food. It helped that they settled in what has become known as the Fertile Crescent, a crescent-shaped band of land in the Middle East containing rich soils. With the invention and development of agriculture, the Sumerians were able to produce more food than they could eat. Being able to devote less time to long hunting trips and foraging far and wide, the population thrived. They could concentrate on the bigger picture, the advancement of their civilization. They came up with new ways of doing things, which made life easier. They were big inventors, perhaps more so than the famous ancient Egyptians. They invented the 60-minute clock, the concept of city living, with a grid system for the roads and buildings, a design we still use today. The city of Uruk was home to 50,000 people and was the biggest in the world. They invented the wheel, the plow, schools, sailboats, script, arithmetic, geometry, irrigation, tools like the saw, sandals, chariots, and beer. As the Sumerians were inventing, the Egyptian pyramids were still 900 years away from being built. Stonehenge didn't exist, and the last few remaining woolly mammoths still clung to life on the Alaskan Wrangel Island. But to succeed in developing such a successful civilization, the people had to clear large swaths of countryside to make way for their farming and cities. At the time, there were untamed wild animals that roamed the countryside. Some of these the Sumerians domesticated, such as sheep and goats, which they used for wool, leather, meat, and milk, or the ox, onager, and donkey, which worked their land, and the horse which pulled their carts and accompanied them into battle. Most are still in use today, but the onager, otherwise known as the Asiatic wild ass, is now locally extinct in Iraq. But what about some of the other animals in ancient Mesopotamia? Although the Sumerians had become farmers, they also supplemented their homegrown diets with freshly hunted meat. The open plains of Mesopotamia were the ideal hunting grounds. They caught the likes of gazelle, wild boar, stags, wild mules, and birds. But there were far more dangerous beasts than those 6,000 years ago. Many of the predators preyed on the same animals the people liked to hunt. As their civilization expanded, there were likely to be more than the occasional encounter with one of these predators. Asiatic lions roamed what is now Iraq. These lions, now extinct everywhere except for Gir National Forest in India, were widespread across Saudi Arabia, eastern Turkey, Iran, Mesopotamia, Pakistan, and India. During the time of the Sumerians, hunting lions had political and religious meanings. If the king was a successful hunter, then the gods would look down favorably on him. Lions played an important role in their culture. Depictions, carved in basalt, show kings or priests slaying lions. Often the king was shown to be taller than the lion, even as it stood on its hind legs. This was a sign of the ruler's power and authority. The royal lion hunts that took place were a way for a king to show that he was in command of the nature that surrounded them, and he was protecting his people. As the Bronze Age began, royal lion hunts were depicted on monumental gates and stone obelisks. They show the king hunting lions and wild bulls from his chariot. Afterward, he pours wine over the slain animals as an offering. But it also seems that human-lion conflicts unrelated to hunting in the region were plentiful. Ancient Assyrian texts record how plagues of lions obstructed the roads and harassed herdsmen and shepherds by attacking livestock in the plains. The king at the time saw it as his duty to protect his people and set out on his chariot to rid the land of the nuisance lions. At one time, he claimed that his chariot was surrounded by a pride of them. But with the power of God, he killed everyone with a single shot from his bow. How true these stories were is anyone's guess, but it seemed that lions were a huge part of the Sumerians' culture and everyday lives. It was believed that some of the lions were even semi-tame and walked amongst people in idyllic gardens. The artistic depictions of hunts on the walls of their ancient buildings or intricately patterned bowls give some insight into their lives back then. Dogs were sometimes used in the hunts. The sport of the lion hunt was used as entertainment as well. There is even speculation that Caspian tigers lived during the same time as the Sumerians. These tigers, with much narrower black stripes than their Siberian relatives, became extinct much later on. They were intermediate in size between Bengal and Siberian tigers and could be found in the regions around the Caspian Sea, including Turkey, Iran, Mesopotamia, Afghanistan, and across to West China. Although the timings of localized extinctions of the Caspian tiger are not known, the species as a whole became extinct thousands of years after the Sumer people first set eyes on it. The animals were killed by large hunting parties, and their main source of prey, the wild pigs, were decimated by people too. The reed beds along the riverways were destroyed to make way for agriculture. Then, in the 20th century, the Russian army cleared woodlands, especially in Turkestan, of any remaining tigers to protect local settlements. The Sumerians worshipped gods like Ninurta, the ancient Mesopotamian god associated with farming, healing, hunting, law, and war. They built temples on the highest elevations to reach towards the sky. Priests would give sacrifices to the gods. Archaeologists have found the burnt skeleton remains of a lion and a leopard inside one temple. These were offered to the gods. The waters from the two Mesopotamia rivers created a diverse habitat in the semi-desert region. Leopards lived throughout Mesopotamia several thousand years ago. These were not the African leopards, but the Persian or Anatolian leopards. They are still in existence today, although they are thought to be only around 1,000 individuals in fragmented populations within the Arabian Peninsula. They are similar in size to their African counterparts, but their coat color changes depending on their locality. The sand cats was another animal that Sumerians would have come into contact with. Instead of the feared big cats of the time, these rarely grew larger than 50 centimeters or 20 inches long. These cats are at home in sandy desert environments, far from water sources. It was thought that some of the small wildcats of the time were domesticated by those living in Mesopotamia as a means of pest control to keep mice and rats away from precious grain stores. Evidence has been found of African wildcats also being domesticated on the Arabian Peninsula, a species that is thought to be the ancestor of modern-day household cats. Like the sand cat, they rarely drink water, gaining all they need from their diverse diet of small mammals, birds, reptiles, and insects. In contrast to the tiny wildcats on the Iberia Peninsula were elephants. They were the largest animals to have walked alongside the Sumerians. Their ancestors inhabited the Arabian Peninsula. A 7-million-year-old trackway has recently been discovered, which stretches for 12 acres. It is thought that these giant footprints, which belonged to a herd of about 13 individuals, were made by Stegotetrabelodon certicus, a primitive type of elephant. Of course, their early proboscideans had died out by the time the Sumer settled, but their descendants hadn't. The elephants that inhabited Mesopotamia were a subspecies of Asian elephant called the Syrian elephant. They were the largest subspecies, measuring 3.5 meters, or 11 feet 6 inches tall at the shoulder. There is debate about where the elephants came from and how they arrived in Mesopotamia. Some suggest that they were transported during the Bronze Age, rather than herds of them living naturally amongst the Sumer people. The imports were used as war elephants. Although there is undisputed evidence of their existence, they didn't feature much in the ancient artistic designs of the Sumerians. But craftsmen used the tusks to create ivory carvings. After the Sumerians, during the reign of Shalmaneser, 859 to 824 BC is the last time elephants were depicted in ancient artworks. It is therefore suggested that they became locally extinct during this time. Kings had boasted about their hunting the great beasts, and there was likely human conflict with them as people tried to protect their crops from being demolished by them. Some suggest that the elephants were an invasive species, and their damage to the fragile ecosystem ultimately led to their demise. However, most historians agree that they were most probably hunted to extinction by people. One of the most frightening species that the Sumerians lived with is still present in modern-day Iraq: the striped hyena. With its bone-crushing jaws and nocturnal attacks on people, is still widespread, living in North and East Africa, the Middle East, and India. The Sumerians would likely have encountered these animals despite their apparent shyness of humans. But there were always opportunistic hunters amongst the hyena clans, and people likely fell victim to occasional attacks. The Sumerians have given us so much in terms of technological advances, things we take for granted today. Yet, they had to overcome a harsh semi-desert environment and the threat from the surrounding wildlife to become one of the most successful civilizations we have known. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment with what you would like to see in the following videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.